Okay, so as we have already kind of referred to in class over the past few days that we've kind of started this look at ancient China, um, China was broken down into a number of different history points that we call different dynasties. And these are different um, ruling families that take control in power at different times. And we kind of break China down into these different ruling families based on the time that they ruled in history. And one of the big things that you guys need to understand is uh, what the dynastic cycle was and kind of how these families ruled, the process they took to come to power, and what went on during those time frames. And it's pretty similar throughout all of them. So we kind of come up with this idea of this Chinese dynastic cycle, which was a very important concept that you guys need to know as we talk about the number of different things that we're going to look at within ancient China for the rest of the 9 weeks. So, as we work our way through, the first step is the fact that a new ruler comes to power and unites China underneath the new dynasty. As a result, these new rulers gain what they call the mandate of heaven, which is basically the divine right to govern. And that means basically that the people that have come to power have the right to rule because it's a God given they were given the right to rule by the heavens, which gave them, as we talked about in the past, when we talked about ancient Egypt and the pharaohs, an absolute power over um, their country, and as a result of that, they were pretty much unquestionable in terms of their rules and what they made. Because if the heavens didn't want them there as a ruler, then they would be moved out, um, or they would never have been chosen to be that particular ruler. You guys really need to know these terms: mandate of heaven, divine right, and the dynasties, because the fact that all of this stuff is going to be very, very important, not only for when we're talking about ancient China, but when we talk about other civilizations as well too. So make sure that you guys know this and have a pretty good understanding of what we're talking about here with all of this stuff. In step two, these rulers are very wise, they're very good, and as a direct result, China or the country or China in this sense experiences a golden age, meaning that there's a lot of people that gain a lot of wealth, a lot of power. People are healthy, living longer lives. All as a direct result of the fact that there's a wise ruler in power and he's doing things for the betterment of the country. And so they experience what they call a golden age as a direct result. In step three, we start to see that the population of China will increase because, like I said before, the health of people becomes better, so they live longer. People are having more children, so the population begins to increase because people can afford more children. They can live longer, and it's just a number of it's a situation in which people are just having a better standard of living, and as a direct result, we start to see the population increase. Step four, we start to see a little bit of the decline in the population because corruption is going to appear because there's always going to be a person or a group of people that are going to come in and try to have more power, more money, more control, and as a direct result of that, the empire's going to decline because then people are going to start to mistrust these people, and it's a big problem for the people of this particular dynasty, and as a result of that, we start to see more and more people wanting more power, and it, like I said, starts to raise up more corruption, and we start to see the empire start to decline. Eventually, something's going to happen, whether it be a natural disaster, famine, flood, or not famine, but a drought, flood, something along those lines that's going to pop up. And normally, the disaster in a very just and ruling time would have been not been a major problem because they would have had enough food stored in order to help offset this problem. But because of the corruption that's starting to appear in the government, there's not as much food available, and basically that means people are going to start to starve, and famine's going to start to pop up. Um, and with the overpopulation, there's more mouths that cannot be fed because of this famine. So the people who once trusted these rulers as being great and such like that, because of the corruption, now they're going to start to mistrust them. And as a direct result of this mistrust, we start to see that the rebels, the population, is going to rebel and start a civil war. And as we talked about before in Egypt, majority of the lower or majority of the population is in the lower classes. So therefore, there's already a ready-made army for there. They just need a piece of person to come up and stand up against these particular governments that might be corrupt and doing the people wrong. And it's very easy now because there's something to say, well, we have this famine because it's a direct result of the misuse of government and funding and everything else like that. And as a direct result of that, it begins to start a civil war. And with this civil war, we start to see the country start to fall apart. And as a direct result, with the mistrust and everything else like that, people are not going to pay attention. In China, they thought that you couldn't keep the divine right or the mandate of heaven all through your leadership. You had to prove that you were a good leader in order to keep that. In this situation, the ruler would lose the mandate of heaven and basically lose power. And at that point in time, they're kind of overthrown, and we're kind of looking for a new government at that point in time. Population is obviously going to decrease because, number one, you've had a famine. People have died from that. You're going to have a war, a civil war. People are going to die from that. And as a direct result, once again, like the life expectancy is going to drop. People aren't going to be having as many children anymore because of the fact that they can't afford to have a lot of children. And basically, like I said, population begins to decrease as a direct result of this violence and the poor living conditions that they live in. Eventually, China is going to go through what we call a warring states period. And if you guys see this little map down here at the bottom here, you see that these are a number of different families that rule different city-states in China. And what they would do is they would go through what we call the warring states period, and they would fight for control of all of the land. And basically, as a result of the strongest one would then fight and come to power. And basically, they're the ones that kind of take control of China, reunite them underneath one leadership. And this one state that emerges victorious becomes the new emperor of China, new ruling family, and they establish a new dynasty in China as a direct result. Like I said, they started a new empire. The new dynasty is established underneath this new family after these warring states periods are concluded. And we start to see that the cycle once again starts itself again. The ruler gains a mandate of heaven, and we just kind of go through this cycle over and over again until eventually the government will be overthrown. We'll start to see communism rise, and we'll get into a little bit more about that in the second semester. Like I said, this is a very important concept. If you missed anything on your notes that you guys should have had open or a separate sheet of paper out to jot some things down about this, make sure that you guys go back, watch this again, and get those things in there because it's going to be pretty key to what we're talking about. So, with that said, make sure that you guys are moving on to the next level or the next stage in the China quest with you and your partner, and we're going to kind of go from there. So I hope this explains the dynastic cycle to you, and we'll talk a little bit more about some other things here in the next few days. All right.